We mentioned it before as one of our favorite places to go. Then it became our second program that we did. It's Crawford Hill. We're going to talk about it. Stay tuned. It is that time of week again. It is Dubkir Depot, the official podcast of Dubkir Media. My name is Kirk Orndorff. I'm owner and founder of Dubkir Media, and we're here to talk about our favorite stuff. And in this week's episode, it happens to be Crawford Hill. It's our second full length program that we did. It's one of our favorite places. We rail fan. Been going there for over 20 years, and it still doesn't disappoint, even if traffic levels are down a little bit. But I say we dive right in. We got to go back to kind of the same thing as the Moffat video, where I didn't really start any of the footage to do a DVD about it, a full length program. And ultimately, what wound up happening was just it's a favorite place to go rail fan. And so when you're going to Nebraska for a wedding, hey, and you've got the day off after the wedding, make the 2-hour drive north to go to Crawford, rail fan a little bit, maybe stay overnight since you're not working the next day either, and go from there. So that's kind of how your first trip starts, and then your next one going into it is you've got 3 days, a 3-day weekend. Let's spend 2 of those 3 days going to Crawford Hill. And so that's kinda where my footage came from. But, going back though, our very first trip to Crawford Hill was in 2003. It was a trip that I took with my dad and with a longtime friend of his. Um, and he brought his son as well, Chase, who needs to be mentioned at all times. Sorry, Chase. Uh so it was the 4 of us. We went and we left here in the morning. We caught 3985 leaving Cheyenne on I don't remember where it was going, but we caught 3985 leaving. Then we just followed the line out to Sydney, and then followed the line from Sydney to Alliance, and then Alliance up to Crawford Hill. Um, so we only got a few hours the first evening at Crawford, and then the next day was the big, we're here to Railfan Crawford Hill type of day, where we hiked from Belmont down to the Twin Horseshoe Curves down at Breezy Point. Um, and that was a really fun day. But when you're 12 years old, hiking for 8 miles isn't exactly fun. And neither is the 102-degree temperatures that it happened to be that day. Chase was 7 at the time, so he was the lucky one. Got carried for quite a ways on the return trip to Belmont. Um, but I did get a timetable thrown down to me that day. We had a couple helper sets stop and offer us water, and at that time the helper sets were trios of green SD60Ms with a fuel tender in the middle of it. Something that didn't last until our next trips to Crawford. That was really cool. It was something that we kind of caught the end of it. And the next trip to Crawford Hill that we took was in '04, and um, it was a family trip. I went with my dad, my uncle, my cousin, and my grandpa. And the 5 of us, we overnighted at the Fort Robinson barracks, which is something that you can do, the crew quarters at Fort Robinson. Um, and we just when we had been hiking in 2003, we had been told just drive down to the curves. So we did that on this particular day, and we spent the entire second day we spent right there at the curves. And um, at the time, it was still fuel tenders on the helper sets, but this would be the last time that we saw that. The and it was just absolutely busy, and it was a fun trip. It was a good trip. The weather kind of cooperated. It kind of didn't, but with the clouds, we were able to um, not really have to worry about our light, so we could kind of sit wherever we wanted. My grandpa just set up a lawn chair on the inside of Breezy Point, and that's kind of how it worked there. And after that, we made two trips while I was in high school. One of them in 2006, one of them in 2008. At this point, the helper sets had merged from green 60s to a mix of 60s and 75s. In fact, the second trip was helper sets were almost exclusively SD-75s. So it showed how the line had changed in that amount of time. But so that's kind of how it became a favorite location to railfan. We made a few trips while I was in college as well. But by this point, the helper sets were 70 aces and ES-44s, and that's what they still use to this day as helper sets. So things haven't changed too terribly much in the last 15 years in terms of the helper sets and how things look. Now, obviously, traffic is way down in this amount of time, which is unfortunate to say the least. But it's still a great place to go rail fan. The Crawford's not a very big town. It's if I remember correctly, about 1,100 people. Um, a couple small sit down restaurants in town. Only a couple hotels in town, neither of which are real high end. You're about 20 miles from Shadron, which is a college town, so you do get a more wide assortment of places to eat, places to stay. You're also about an hour from Alliance, which also has some more options. And uh, but anyway, the in terms of the video though, doing the DVD Battle for Crawford Hill, what we do in the video is we just start right there at Crawford at the helper pockets, and we work our way up to Belmont and end it just right there at the bridge. Um, it's a lot of hiking went into this one. And I mentioned the trip with the wedding earlier. That one was not really a lot of hiking compared to what we would see in the trips behind that, but still a little bit. And we did get some good scenes, whether that be right in Crawford or whether that be um, right at the bridge at Belmont. And there were a few scenes there right there along the dirt road, Saw Log Road. Um, but really, a lot of the scenes started coming in our next trip, and that's where, if you remember our Moffat episode, we had every other week in the summer, we had 3-day weekends. And that particular trip, I had decided I would take 2 days. I would just leave on my Friday, go up, um, really kind of exhaust myself, being up there, having not slept. But um, we did a lot of just kind of right in town on the first day, and then the second day drove up to Belmont, hiked down, didn't quite make it all the way to Breezy Point, but by this point I was in my mid 20s, and a 7-mile hike was a lot more tolerable, especially when I'm doing it to myself as opposed to our parents doing it. But it wound up being a really good trip, and we got a lot of really good footage out of that hike. Um, and it was such a good trip that my dad, one of his coworkers at the time, and somebody that they had met from California by the name of Tim, um, they had kind of seen my pictures, and they wanted to kind of try something similar. We live about 3 hours or so away from Crawford, 3.5, 4, depending on the route that you take to get up there. And so on this particular day, we just took the quickest route, little over 3 hours to get there. Got to Belmont and just started hiking, and that was the day that the cover photo was taken with the S curve and the 70 ace and the city rails. And that one wound up actually being a pretty good day. We caught, I think, 4 or 5 of the city rails on those trains, and it was really the only time that we caught the city rails up there. But that was a nice afternoon hike up there. We got some trains in the cut. We got some trains just kind of on the straightaway in between the big summit cut and the S curve. And then the S curve is ultimately where we ended. We just kind of waited there for a little bit and got the cover scene. We got a meet right there. Um, and then just turned around and hiked back and wound up driving home that night. And it was really exhausting, but it was really fun. And so that was a good one. And by that point, I now have all the footage pretty much that I need from Breezy Point up to the summit, um, with the exception of right there on top of the big summit cut. And so that was kind of became the goal for the next time I was up there. Just a few months later, a friend of mine and his dad wanted to go up there, and so we kind of put a plan together, where one day would be the Powder River Basin, one day would be the line in between Donkey Creek and Edgemont Alliance, that kind of area, and then day 3 would be Crawford Hill, and then come home after that. And unfortunately, life happened. The my friend's father passed away right before the trip, and so he did not accompany me on it, and fully respect the decision. I don't think I would have gone on the trip either, but I wound up going up there then by myself, and knowing what I needed to get up at the top, I was able to get it. And one of my favorite places just to sit is right there up at the very top of the summit cut. You're overlooking the area, and um, you're kind of open. And that particular time of year, you didn't have to worry about wood ticks. For those who have gone to Crawford Hill, just how bad the wood ticks can be in the summertime, especially in that summit area, because you got a lot of dead wood in that area. You got pine trees that have fallen or are growing, and just the wood ticks can be absolutely crazy. And in fact, whenever we go up to Crawford, it's we bring the bug spray, and long pants are required. And I've gone to the point where I wear kind of the higher boots. They're not hiking boots, but they do have the sides, like the ankle supports and all that, just in an effort to try to keep wood ticks off. And then, like I said, the bug spray is there, and it is the deep woods version of the bug spray. And that actually does seem to work really well, in terms of keeping wood ticks off and all that. And naturally, here I am scratching because once you start talking about wood ticks, well, guess what? It just follows. I hate those things. Anywho, on a little bit more positive subject, what that wound up giving me was it gave me everything I needed from Breezy Point up to the top of the hill. I felt that I had pretty much everything I needed from Saw Log Road down to town, but there's kind of a giant gap in the middle that I had, and that's from Saw Log Road up to Breezy Point. And during a couple of those trips, like in high school, we wouldn't stay at the Ponderosa Ranch, but we would use a day pass. The Ponderosa Ranch, they were really good about the day pass. They were really good about allowing people out to access the curves via their property. And unfortunately, by this point, the ranch had been sold, and the owners at that time weren't real rail fan. They weren't really thinking about the rail fans. Now, last I knew, it had been sold again, and the new owners are accommodating of rail fans as long as you stay. I don't want to say stay away from hunting season, but they will accommodate you, either with a day pass or staying at the cabin, as long as it's not a busy hunting season. So that's good. That's a great place to go. Great asset to use to access these areas of the curve. But at this time, we didn't have that access, so it was going to be challenging to try to get in there. And what we did was about a year later, this the same friend who we was going to go with in March of 2017, we decided, hey, we're going to go try this. We're going to try a full day. Going to park down on Sawlog Road and just hike all the way to the Twin Horseshoe Curves, and then hike our way back. And um, it was starting to go really well. We caught a few trains on the east side of the curves, and we're just about getting ready to make our way back when he felt that we needed to get back to the car. And um, I if we hadn't done that, it would have been a perfect day to have done the plan that we had, because we wound up with 3, 4, maybe even 5 more eastbounds. That would have been perfect for the west side of the curves. And um, but ultimately, we wound up shooting them at the public areas in town, Saw Log up at Belmont. Um, and it was okay, but not didn't get me what I needed at the Twin Horseshoe Curves. And so I got all the footage into it and did not like what I had the gap in the middle. Um, but we at that time, that was when I had just been let go from my job in TV. And so I wasn't working, and my dad had just been laid off from his job, so he wasn't working either. And so we were kind of planning a trip to Crawford anyway. But then I got a message, and thank you, Jeff, for sending the message saying the Crawford helper sets were SD70 Max, and most of them were the XBN 70 Max. And what had happened on this one was there was a shortage at the time of locomotives that were equipped with PTC, positive train control. Um, and so all of the aces and Gevos had been pulled out of helper service to go run these trains. And they had to just pull the closest thing they could out of storage, which was a lot of the 70 Max. And so that wound up being a tremendous day. I mean, my dad and I were up there, I think, within the week after receiving that message, because we find out that a bunch of Grinsteins were in helper service, and we are absolutely not going to let those slip. Also, I knew that I needed this footage from the Twin Horseshoe Curves, and it wound up just being a great day. Um, you know, there was a couple of the wagon wheel patches that were in helper service. And um, most of them, though, were the XBN that had the number on the side. And all of them had been patched. Some of them were patched with the swoosh, some of them were patched with the wagon wheel. But it wound up just kind of being a really good day. And um, it was a long day. If I remember correctly, my Fitbit said that I took like 28,000 steps that day. We did about 11 and a half miles of round trip. Um, and it got me what I needed to be able to finish this program. Um, funny Little bit of a funny story on the July trip with my friend. I had been hiking. I had gone a little further than he had. I Something fell off of my monopod, and it just a little tiny piece. And I knew exactly where it had happened because I had to drop the monopod for something. And then when I picked it up, I didn't look to see that the thing was off. That the thing was off. It wasn't on there anymore. And when I went back with my dad a few months later, I knew roughly where I had dropped my monopod, and sure enough, I found it. And so that was kind of cool. And I took a picture on my phone of, hey, here it is back on the monopod. Now it was just completely and totally coated in dirt, in mud, um, which is understandable. After what 3 months and the 3.5 months just laying in the dirt. But it was still right there on the top though, and I got it back, and it's still actually with my monopod, so that's good. Um, and that got me what I needed. And so I was really pleased with what all I had. There was a lot to choose from in town. There was a lot to choose from along Saw Log Road. Um, One of my favorite things to do, actually, while I was filming this, was whenever sunset was coming along, I would go sit at the horseshoe curve there, the kind of the mini horseshoe curve there at Saw Log Road, and watch the sunset. And sure enough, hope that a train would show up. And almost every time I would do it, a train would show up. And it made for great video, but unfortunately, none of those videos really kind of made it into the program. But they could be future YouTube videos down the road. Or something I've considered is like I don't want to say after hours video, but I mean that's exactly kind of what it is. is you're not out there rail fanning in the good light. You're not out there rail fanning in sun. It is after dark, and so I would have to look into it, see if it would be a project that I could do, or if it would just be something to throw on the YouTube channel. And so definitely head over, subscribe if you haven't already, to see if those do wind up making it down the road. But um, so that's always something that I enjoy doing. And if you've been to Crawford, you know that the weather at Crawford is actually very solid. Um, you know it's very similar to Colorado and to the Black Hills and to eastern Wyoming, where you wind up with low humidity, lots of sunshine. Um, the wind can get dicey, but really not all that bad in this particular part of Nebraska. Um, and the evenings are very cool, and the nights times are cool, and except for, of course, the 2 times I've been up there when the high temperatures were over 100, so that's always good. But this trip that I took, though, in 2016, where I hiked from Belmont down to Breezy Point by myself, the high temperature that day, despite being early August, was like 71 degrees. It was so absolutely perfect that you just can't ask for any better. And we one of the days that was 100, we actually woke up and it was in the mid 50s, and we didn't pack any long sleeves or anything because we were expecting triple digits, and so it well, little chilly as we're getting a train climbing the grade in the fog at Belmont, but um, that's kind of one of the cooler scenes of that whole video is. And we woke up that morning and it was about 55. The high temperature that day was 101 degrees, and you know, we I didn't mind shivering a little bit there at the summit as that train came by, because it was really cool video. I had to throw the camera into manual focus because the fog was so thick, but it all worked out, and that's got to be one of the more talked about scenes of that video. And again, this video is also currently available on our YouTube channel. The goal ultimately down the road is to get all of the videos onto the YouTube channel, and then rotate out which ones are free to view for the public and which ones require a membership. So definitely head on over there, and membership is only a few dollars a month. Uh, Again, the goal is to get all of the videos on there, as well as most, if not all, of the videos without narration. Then that's going to be ultimately the only place where you'll be able to see the videos without narration. Um, and that's a down the road project. We're still trying to get to that point, but head on over, do that. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Head over to Facebook, Instagram. Give us some follows there. Um, and on Facebook, go find the group page for us. It's the Dubkir Depot fan group. Um, where we'll have some, polls, we'll have discussions, photos, updates on the show, and all the kind of the things that you need to know. So, but anyway, the battle for Crawford Hill, it's still one of the more popular videos that we have. Crawford Hill is a very well known location. Still one of our favorite places to go, even though the traffic is way down. Um, I've lost count at the number of trips that we've made up there. I think it's 6, maybe even 7 for the video for the actual program. Um, Plus, I think it was an annual trip in college, and a couple times in high school, a couple times before high school, and that's a lot of trips up there. And then we've hiked pretty much the entirety of the grade, all the way from Saw Log Road up to the summit. It's a fun area. If you like trains working hard, this is the place for you, because there are no crossings, and the coal trains especially, they have to get manned helpers, run 8 pretty much the whole way up the grade. And it is the finest example of machine versus gravity, and just a great place to rail fan. But anywho, this is our time to call it for this episode. Again, be sure to go follow us on the socials and YouTube, and join the group, and hopefully we'll see you out trackside.